I am back with another sponsor video. This one is about Sun Square Saturn, and I decided to entitle it Black Hole Sun because I love that song by Soundgarden. And even though the song doesn't pertain to Sun Square Saturn, it does kind of have a Sun Square Saturn kind of vibe. Especially the chorus where they're singing Black Hole Sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Because when you have Sun Square Saturn, you might feel like you have more rainy days than sunny days, or you can look at it as Saturn is not allowing your sun to shine as brightly as it can unless you put forth a lot of effort. So let's get started. This video has been sponsored by Kawaii Honey. Thank you, Kawaii, for sponsoring another video. Kawaii wants to know, does aspect cause damage to one's self-esteem and self-expression from an early age? Yes, it certainly can, especially if the signs Taurus or the second house are involved. Why is this aspect known as the father complex aspect? Well, with the Sun and Saturn both ruling fathers, it makes a lot of sense. So I'll get into some of the possible manifestations of father-child relationship in a minute. From an astrological medical standpoint, does this aspect produce dry skin, hyperpigmentation, and brittle bones? Yes, in some cases it can. Is this aspect that is an indicator of low self-esteem? It can be in some cases. Again, if the second house and Taurus is involved, it certainly can. Does this aspect improve over time? It can with effort. And a lot of times, just with squares in general, you just get used to the challenges, limitations, restrictions that the squares can bring. And you just learn to adjust over time. Now, some people, depending on where they are in the evolutionary spectrum, may always struggle with these squares because they really haven't learned how to overcome the lower vibrational side of themselves. Can you tell me more about this astrological aspect? Yes, I will. So I have a bunch of information, possible manifestations that could take place with Sun square Saturn. Keep in mind that not every manifestation will apply to everyone that has Sun square Saturn. So it's like a mixed bag. You might relate to some of what I'm saying. You may not relate to some of the other things that I'm saying, but people with Sun square Saturn, they could experience, I'll say maybe, because I can't even remember how long this list is, but it's a long list. So quite a bit of what I'm saying will apply to you, but some of it may not. So it depends on the signs, the house placements, house rulerships, and all that good stuff. How does this aspect play out in other famous and well-known individual charts? Well, I've already prepared a list of celebrities that have Sun square Saturn, so we'll get into that. And then you said, I have this aspect in my chart, Sun in Virgo at the 18th degree in the 11th house, squaring Saturn in Sagittarius at the 14th degree in the second house. I believe this aspect played a major role in molding my self-esteem from my childhood to now. Yes, most definitely, because your Saturn is in the second house. So hopefully, with time, you will be able to overcome these self-esteem issues. So we're going to get into the general possible manifestations of Sun square Saturn. And I'm basically calling it states of being and circumstances. Now, Sun square Saturn usually does not produce an easy life. And it can lead to serious depression. Now, the person may not be depressed all the time, but they could be depressed periodically. Some people with Sun square Saturn, like they always are basically just operating in a more depressive state. Lack of enjoyment or happiness, loneliness, challenge with living according to your purpose. Self-expression is restricted or limited, you could say. Creative expression is limited or challenged. Challenges with authority figures. Free will is limited, restrained. Meanness, cruelty, cold-heartedness. Now, some people with Sun square Saturn, they are going to be mean, cruel, and cold-hearted. But some people with Sun square Saturn will have people in their life who are mean, cruel, and cold-hearted. So always know that these aspects are interchangeable. They don't always have to deal with you personally, they could deal with the people in your life. Stinginess, miserliness. Also, the sun squaring Saturn can produce a challenge with your ability to thrive, and you could lack vitality. Heart problems are common. This is a common aspect for heart attacks, cardiac arrests. You could have been born with a heart murmur, heart palpitations as well. Also, the sun rules the back, so back problems are common. This can lead to a broken back or deterioration of the vertebrae. Constriction or deterioration of area of the body represented by sign of the sun. So we're talking about sun in Virgo, it could lead to constipation with Saturn constricting the intestines. If we're talking about sun in Aquarius, it could be constriction of the blood vessels or a pinched nerve. Sun in Aries could lead to a stroke. Disorders of the teeth, knees, bones, joints, and skin, because Saturn rules all those areas of the body, with the sun acting as the irritant or catalyst for these disorders. So, for instance, if someone has sun in Aries squaring Saturn in Capricorn, they could be an adrenaline junkie that results in broken bones and knee injuries. Also, Sun square Saturn can bring about a premature death, whether it's the death of the person that has Sun square Saturn. If you have a boyfriend or a husband, you could lose them to a premature death, and it could be through illness or an accident. Exhibiting aloofness is another possibility, or where you're really standoffish or guarded. Experiencing unpopularity or a lack of likability. Perceiving oneself as unlovable or unworthy of affection. Malicious motives. Evil, satanic. And of course, that's on the extreme end. Lack of physical appeal. Scarcity. Experiencing feelings of inadequacy, such as right here with this is the classic battle between David and Goliath of the Bible. Feeling small. Having a questionable reputation or being at risk of losing it. Condemnation. Being overly critical of oneself. A pessimistic perspective. Appearing wooden or lifeless. Aging before your time. Being a wallflower or shrinking violet, basically shyness. Afraid to take risk or put yourself out there. A glutton for punishment. Sadistic, masochistic, being put to the test or issues with test taking. Exploitation, being used. Condemnation. Sorry, I had that in there twice. I had to make sure I cover all bases. Austerity. You could say the person could live a life of austerity by choice, or the austerity could have been imposed upon them, or it could be like a government leader that imposes austerity measures. Severity. Destitution. A job that sucks the life out of you. Challenge with finding a job or career that is aligned with your purpose. Lacking a sense of pride. Being under tight controls. Control freak. Being arrested, run-ins with the police. Failure. Being under close scrutiny. Issues with image. Bad investments. Shutdowns and shutouts. Degradation. Belittling. Disrespect. Discrimination. Fearful. Fears realized. Endings. Finality. Challenges with bringing things to completion. Lacking confidence. Inhibitions. Defeatist or fatalistic approach to life. Heavy karma. Misplaced priorities. Delays. Late bloomer. Wasted time. Time is not on your side. Missed opportunities. So, about fathers. The father could display a harsh, unloving, and emotionally distant nature. The father could neglect his obligations. Father could exhibit controlling tendencies. The father could prioritize discipline over nurturing as a parent. The untimely death of the father. Exploitation at the hands of father. Father has evil intentions. A close relationship with father is lacking. Having little to no respect for father. Now let's get into children because children is a major theme of Sun Square Saturn because the sun rules children. This could play out as the death of a child, miscarriage, or stillbirth, infertility, being denied children, choosing to remain child free, a special needs child, especially in terms of delays, a child with discipline issues, a child who suffers from depression, an irresponsible child, state custody of a child. All right, so let's get into the celebrities that have Sun Square Saturn, some of the celebrities. So starting off, we have Catherine, Princess of Wales. She's a Capricorn, has Sun in Capricorn in the fifth, squaring Saturn in Libra in the third. So it says after her graduation, Middleton and her family faced intensive tabloid press scrutiny due to her relationship with William. So being under close scrutiny is a big theme of Sun Square Saturn. In December 2012, St. James Palace announced that Catherine was pregnant with her first child. The announcement was made earlier in the pregnancy than is usual, as she had been admitted to King Edward VII's hospital, suffering from hyperemesis gravidarum, a severe form of morning sickness. She gave birth to Prince George at St. Mary's Hospital, London, in July 2013. The severe morning sickness returned with the subsequent pregnancies, forcing Catherine to cancel her official engagements. So this square is representing her difficult pregnancies, especially with that sun in Capricorn in the fifth house. Described bringing her newborn home from the hospital for the first time as terrifying. So remember, I said this square can evoke fear, and that's what this is representing, especially with that sun being in Capricorn. Rhonda Gerlich of the New York Times has noted her ability to balance modernity with traditional royal norms. Speaking to the Times on Catherine's 40th birthday, her aide stated that she does not accept advice on a PR basis and will never do something because she thinks the media will like it. That's very much Sun squaring Saturn, with Saturn being in the third house representing the media. Jamie Lothar Pinkerton, her and William's former private secretary, stated that she has that almost old-fashioned queen mother attitude to drama. She just doesn't do it. So that's very Sun square Saturn. And then also her health issues, that's very Sun square Saturn too, because sometimes she may lack the vitality that she may normally have because of her illness. Oprah Winfrey, Aquarius. Sun in Aquarius in the second house, squaring Saturn and Scorpio in the 10th. Sexual perversion. So, more so in terms of who she's connected with, Harvey Weinstein, but also the sexual perversion, the, abuse that was going on in that school that she opened in Africa. Death of baby born premature, against having children, hiding the fact that she is a lesbian through Stedman Graham. Connections, friendships with perverts like Harvey Weinstein. So I had that in there twice. Pamela Anderson, Cancer. Sun in Cancer squaring Saturn and Aries. Exploitation through Playboy and Baywatch. Violation of privacy. Her home sex tape with her and Tommy Lee was stolen and sold. Anderson suffered sexual abuse as a child, a fact she revealed publicly in 2014. She said she was molested by a female babysitter from ages 6 to 10, raped by a 25-year-old man when she was age 12, and gang raped by her boyfriend and 6 of his friends when she was 14. So Saturn's ruling her eighth house. So that makes a lot of sense with the sexual abuse she suffered. Also, due to Uranus and Pluto squaring her ascendant, that's representing the gang rape. Venus and Leo squaring Neptune and Scorpio certainly didn't help as well. Feelings of inadequacy. In her case, due to her breast, she had a number of breast surgeries. So cancer rules the breast. Anderson then elected to have breast implant surgery, increasing her bust size to 34D. She increased her bust size again to 34 double D several years later. Troubled relationships with men, battle over children, miscarriage. Lee was sentenced to 6 months in the Los Angeles County Jail for spousal abuse after assaulting Anderson. And, getting arrested is a theme of Sun Square Saturn. And they divorced in 1998. A long custody dispute over their sons followed and was finalized when they were granted joint custody in October 2002. In March 2002, Anderson publicly stated that she had contracted hepatitis C by sharing tattoo needles with Lee and began writing a regular column for Jane magazine. In October 2003, Anderson jokingly said on Howard Stern's radio show that she did not expect to live more than 10 or 15 years, but this was taken seriously by many websites and tabloids. By 2015, Anderson had been cured of hepatitis C. Anderson and Kid Rock in 2003. Oh, I'm sorry, that's just a caption from a picture. Anderson later married Kid Rock, but after a miscarriage while in Vancouver shooting a new film, Blonde and Blonder, Anderson filed for divorce in Los Angeles County Superior Court, citing irreconcilable differences. So she had the miscarriage that can come with Sun Square Saturn. Travis Scott. So Travis Scott has Sun in Taurus, squaring Saturn in Aquarius. So, it points to his abnormal style and look, and basically where he's a nonconformist, the run-ins with the police, and being a rebel rouser. And I just kind of look at him as ugly. I'll just say he's not very appealing. Destroying the laptop while at a club. Now, while I was preparing for this video, I saw a video on Instagram of him basically breaking this laptop while he was dancing at a club. He was like at the DJ table. Anthony Kiedis. Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio in the second house, squaring Saturn in Aquarius. Father was a negative influence in young Anthony's life. Father was a pervert, was chasing a young Tatum O'Neal around at a party. Father allowed Anthony to lose his virginity to one of his hoes, not being comfortable with freely expressing his gay side, but it is coming out more as he ages. I always thought Anthony Kiedis was bisexual, him and Flea. Now, I'm a fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but yeah, Anthony, I think he's been in the closet for years. And if you look at him now, if you see him in interviews, you would think he's been gay all his life. Performing half naked, being lewd, with that Saturn in Aquarius representing nakedness, nudity. Iggy Pop, interesting character. Now, Iggy Pop always like skeeved me out. Like I was always like grossed out by him, especially, him looking older like this, performing with no shirt on. And I saw a video of him performing and he had his pants all the way down where his butt crack was out. I was just like, ew. But I'm intrigued by this man. So I read about him. I looked at a documentary on YouTube about him, and I found some interesting details about his life. And I understand him more as a result of watching the documentary. And he seems like he's a pretty cool dude. So Iggy Pop is a Taurus, Sun in Taurus in the 10th, squaring Saturn and Leo in the first. So in the documentary, it stated that Iggy Pop has had long-term financial problems. So that's definitely dealing with this square right here. Leo and Taurus just does not mix when it comes to financial stability, financial security. Putting his and others' safety at risk when performing, masochistic. So there's been times where he cut himself up on stage and he does these dives into the crowd and all that type of stuff, tears up stuff on stage. And some people are afraid that they're going to get hurt in the process. And in response to him going crazy when he's performing, he says, I'm sure some of it comes from deep childhood issues. So that's representing that square as well. Leo representing children. Being an exhibitionist could conflict with the standards of public venues. So there was a few times where the public venue, they were kind of wary of him performing because of the nature of his performances. Theatrics over true talent. And he has even mentioned that about his acts. And he is rather on the ugly side, aging before his time, and that's due to heavy drug use over the years, being thrusted into the world of black entertainment, which went against his norm. So when I was watching the documentary, he was telling a story about like how he first got started into music, and he started performing with a black band, and he was performing in these black bars, and he was just amazed at just seeing the culture and seeing women with these big booties dancing. Like basically, he said he never saw booties so big, and he never saw booties wiggled the way they did. So that explains why he sticks his butt out when performing. You can kind of see it here with this arch in his back. He has like this permanent arch, which is also dealing with this square as well. Because remember, I said the sun can irritate whatever that is Saturn is representing. So Saturn and Leo, Leo is the back. But also, again, when he performs, he likes to stick his butt out. And I was like, he got that from performing in the black clubs and bars. A promoter's wife had a miscarriage while watching Iggy perform. Promoter blamed Iggy for the miscarriage. So you see how miscarriage is a theme of Sun Square Saturn, and it doesn't have to deal with you doing it directly, happening to you directly. It can just be through association, like in this case right here, and especially with the promoter blaming Iggy for the miscarriage. That's crazy. And then he wrote a song called No Fun to Be Alone, and that's very much represented by this square as well. Feeling possessed while he's on stage, that's represented by this square as well, especially with that Saturn and Leo being in his first house. And you could say feeling possessed also where he just doesn't feel normal. Josephine Baker. So she had Sun in Gemini in the 10th, squaring Saturn and Pisces in the 7th. So she faced discrimination as a performer, which led her to go to Europe to become successful. Being exploited, degrading performances. Like basically, she had to perform and wear costumes that made it look like she was straight out the jungle. Having to perform in blackface when young. Challenges with managing all those children. So she adopted, I think it was like either 12 or 13 children, and she ended up becoming destitute, which is very Sun Square Saturn. Operating in secret as part of French resistance. Challenges with men. Being destitute. Cassie Ventura. So Cassie has Sun in Virgo, square Saturn and Sagittarius. So being with a control freak man, Diddy, lacking free will while she was with him, depression, being punished, being degraded, being trafficked, as evidenced by Saturn being in Sagittarius. Tiffany Pollard, Sun in Capricorn squaring Saturn in Libra. She definitely has image issues. Competing for ugly ass Flavor Flav. So the ugliness comes through Flavor Flav with this square. Polar revealed that she has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So this square is representing the depression that she deals with. Just having Sun in Capricorn alone can lead to depression. But with this square, this her depression could get bad to the point where she doesn't want to go out. She doesn't want to be seen in public, all that. Polar experienced a tragic miscarriage of her child after she dealt with significant stress from her mother, who was strongly chastised by psychologist Jen Mann on family therapy with Dr. Jen for refusing to believe Polar was pregnant. Ozzy Osbourne, Sun in Sagittarius square Saturn in Virgo. Satanic theme music. Even though they claim to be a Christian rock band, they toyed around with the idea of Satanism. I used to be so afraid of this man as a child. That's because I grew up, in a very strict religion. So yeah, like going to a record store and seeing his album covers used to freak me out. Immodest, imprudent, aging before his time, degrading acts, Marilyn Manson. Sun in Capricorn, square Saturn and Aries, satanic, sadistic, masochistic, ugly, and then also those cases where he was exploiting women, but that doesn't really show in this, but it could just show that yes, he could be sadistic, masochistic. Nipsey Hussle, Sun in Leo, square Saturn and Scorpio. His sun is in the sixth, Saturn's in the eighth. Father could have had PTSD due to being a war refugee. So his father was a war refugee from Eritrea, I think. After leaving Epic Records, he founded his own record label. Hustle experimented with unorthodox sales strategies by selling expensive copies of certain mixtapes, even while the songs were distributed for free. So that's very much Sun Square Saturn. Concurrently, he announced that he planned on releasing a mixtape with fellow rapper J Rock titled Red and Blue Make Green, following the release of a music video for Feeling Myself. The album was set for a December 21st, 2010 release. However, both of these projects were eventually postponed indefinitely. This is dealing with issues with bringing things to completion, which is what Sun Square Saturn could do. Death brought him more fame. Over 1 year after its release, the album reached a new peak of number two on the Billboard 200 in April 2019 after Hustle's murder on March 31st. His single Racks in the Middle, featuring Roddy Ricch and Hit Boy, debuted on number 44 on the Hot 100 following his death. The song later peaked at number 26. So basically, he had to die, Saturn and Scorpio, in order to become more famous, Sun and Leo. Murdered. In March 2019, Hustle had contacted officials from the LAPD to arrange a meeting with him and Rock Nation about what they could do to help prevent gang violence in South Los Angeles. The meeting had been scheduled to take place on April 1st. Hustle was murdered on March 31st. According to Los Angeles Police Commissioner Steve Sorbanoff, department officials would meet with Hustle's representatives at a future date on these issues to continue the activist work in his honor. So premature death definitely applies to Nipsey Hussle, and the fact that it was murder is Saturn and Scorpio in the eighth house. And that square also just shows that it looks like him trying to meet with the LAPD resulted in his death, especially with it happening so soon before the meeting was scheduled to take place. Bow Wow. Sun in Pisces in the 11th, squaring Saturn in Sagittarius in the 7th, being exploited as a child. Truth comes out about his false image. Remember, he made that post where he had the private jet, but he was really in coach on a commercial jet. Bow Wow fails to disclose BET deal in child support case. And then this story right here is definitely Sun Square Saturn, dealing with mean men. In this case, Michael Jordan. As a diehard Allen Iverson fan, Bow Wow once came over to Jordan's house wearing a pair of AI signature sneakers and Duke basketball shorts. At one point, the rap star took a nap, and Marcus woke him up because his father, Michael Jordan, a North Carolina legend, didn't like seeing a pair of Duke shorts and the signature shoes of another NBA superstar in his household. The next thing Bow Wow saw was Jordan throwing them away. I went over there with my AIs on. I woke up and it was gone. I remember this is a true story. Mr. Jordan came in there. I was sleeping on the floor of Marcus' room. Marcus on the bed, whatever. He kicked me up like, hey, y'all wake up. I swear to God. Whose sneakers are these? And who has Duke shorts on in my house? Bow Wow recalled on DeSeuss and Mero in 2017. I was like, oh, those are mine, Mr. Jordan. He continued. He was like, yeah, I figured. He threw them out. Hey, yo, John Michael, one of MJ's trusted security guard, get him some Jumpmans now. And that was the story right there. Absolutely. Swear to God on my life. So Pisces is shoes, but also sleeping and also lost. Sagittarius is representing Duke University, and also Michael Jordan being overbearing, doing way too much, and being dogmatic. David Carradine. So David was a Sagittarius squaring Saturn in Pisces. Against this backdrop of marital discord, Carradine almost died by suicide by hanging at the age of 5. He said the incident followed his discovery that he and his elder half-brother Bruce had different biological fathers. Carradine added, "My father saved me and then confiscated my comic book collection and burned it, which was scarcely the point." So this square between his sun and Saturn is included in a T square involving Chiron and Gemini. So that's where the brother comes in. And then the fact that he tried to kill himself at age 5, like that's crazy. But Sun square Saturn, like I said, can make a person feel very depressed. He also faced court-martial for shoplifting when in the military. Multiple arrests. That's very Sun square Saturn. So he's been arrested a number of times over the years. And remember, he played Bill in the Kill Bill movie, and Bill was very sadistic, so that fulfilled that square, and masochistic. This story right here of his death shows that he could have been into autoerotic asphyxiation. Thai police suggested the death might have been from accidental suffocation, since there was no suicide note, and he was found with a rope tied to both his neck and his genitals. Pornthip Rajanal, director of Thailand's Central Institute of Forensic Science, said it may have been a case of autoerotic asphyxiation. So again, that T square that includes that Sun square Saturn and Chiron and Gemini is also pointing to him basically cutting off his breathing as a result of this contraption that he created. Joseph Stalin. Sun in Sagittarius squaring Saturn in Pisces. Control freak. Exiled to Gulag. Had astrologer create a new birth chart for him. If you don't know about Joseph Stalin, he was a dictator of Russia, and he was one of the most evil, cold-hearted, sadistic leaders in history. He's right up there with Hitler. You might even consider him to be worse than Hitler. But if you don't know the history of Joseph Stalin and you're into history, definitely want to look at a documentary or read up on him. Fidel Castro, another control freak. Sun in Leo in the third, square Saturn and Scorpio in the fifth, control freak. Austerity measures. Oh, the austerity measures also applies to Fidel Castro. Like straight up, he basically starved a bunch of Russians. Fidel Castro, Sun in Leo, squaring Saturn and Scorpio, control freak, austerity measures. So it's been rumored that Justin Trudeau, who was the president or prime minister of Canada, he recently stepped down, was his illegitimate son. And I believe it's highly probable, considering that Saturn and Scorpio is in the fifth house. Fifth house is children. He has a Leo son. Leo is children. So I believe it is probable. And Justin Trudeau does favor Fidel Castro. Castro adopted leftist and anti-imperialist ideas while studying law at the University of Havana. So this is dealing with that square, and also he has Sun opposing his moon in Aquarius. So that points to that. The United States came to oppose Castro's government and unsuccessfully attempted to remove him by assassination, economic embargo, and counter-revolution, including the Bay of Pigs invasion of 1961. Countering these threats, Castro aligned with the Soviet Union and allowed the Soviets to place nuclear weapons in Cuba, resulting in the Cuban Missile Crisis, a defining incident of the Cold War in 1962. He was also a highly manipulative. He was also highly manipulative with his formidable intelligence. He could easily manipulate a person or group of people. In addition, he was repetitive and obsessive. In discussions with his colleagues or foreigners, he would repeat the same things repeatedly until they were convinced he was right. It was impossible to contradict him on any subject whatsoever. Anyone who attempted to convince him that he was wrong or even made a suggestion that it could be improved slightly was making a fatal error. Fidel would then make a mental mark of the individual as an idiot and wait for the right time to retaliate against them. Very Sun Square Saturn, especially with Saturn being in Scorpio. In private, though, Castro was skilled at keeping his anger in check and not allowing it to affect his judgment, simply becoming cold and withdrawn. Sally Fields, Sun in Scorpio in the first, squaring Saturn and Leo in the 10th. She was sexually abused by her father. Also, check her out in the movie Not Without My Daughter because that's a perfect example of Sun Square Saturn. And even her role in Steel Magnolias is representing Sun Square Saturn because in the movie she plays Malin, and Malin loses her daughter. I think that's her name in the movie. And Sally Field, she killed that role. Every time I see that last scene where Sally Field breaks down, I cry. Oh my God. And even the movie Mrs. Doubtfire is represented by this square because basically it's pointing to her ex-husband. He defrauds her into thinking that he is a nanny. Dwayne Wade, Sun in Capricorn squaring Saturn in Libra, exploiting his sun and facing condemnation for it, struggles with his image, and then knee problems, knee injuries. However, the knee ailment, commonly called jumper's knee, prevented Wade from joining USA basketball in the Olympic qualifying tournament over that summer. Wade's knee problems led Raleigh sit Wade for final 21 games to undergo long overdue Osatron treatment. Woody Allen, Sun in Sagittarius squaring Saturn in Pisces, a sick and twisted sense of humor, crossing boundaries with adopted daughter, Cat Williams. Sun in Virgo squaring Saturn in Gemini, mean-spirited towards his colleagues, challenges with raising children, negative environment that he had them in, run-ins with police, conflicts with authority figures, mental health issues, especially anxiety and depression. Chris Tucker, Sun in Virgo, square Saturn in Gemini, mental health issues, especially depression, passing on opportunities due to being very critical of scripts, periods of unemployment, taking self too seriously, doesn't do much press, it was quoted. Portia Williams, Real Housewives of Atlanta, Sun in Cancer, square Saturn in Libra. Dating a married man. It was that African man. I think he was already married when she was dating him. Lacking privacy due to being on TV. Disrespect between Portia and the other women on Real Housewives of Atlanta. Remember that fight she had with Kenya Moore? And she was like, I can't believe I did that. After approximately 2 years of marriage, Stewart filed for divorce from Williams. They're talking about Cordell Stewart, who was a football player. During the reunion special for the fifth season of The Real Housewives of Atlanta, she commented that she was totally blindsided by the filing and alleged that she learned of their separation through Twitter. Williams was arrested on December 29, 2014 for speeding with a suspended license, but was released the same day. So being arrested is definitely Sun Square Saturn. She married Nigerian businessman Simon Gua Badia in a traditional Nigerian wedding on November 25th, 2022, followed by a traditional American wedding on November 26th the same year. In February 2024, Portia filed for divorce from Simon after 15 months of marriage. Y'all can fill in the details about why she divorced, but I would think he was very controlling and he was probably a cheater as well, more than likely. Elizabeth Holmes, remember her? Scraggly looking old pup. Sun in Aquarius, square Saturn in Scorpio, fraudulent invention slash technology. In June 2018, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Balwani on fraud charges. Her trial in the case of U.S. versus Holmes et al. Ended in January 2022, when Holmes was convicted of defrauding investors and acquitted of defrauding patients. She was sentenced to serve 11 and a quarter years in federal prison camp, Bryan, beginning on May 30th, 2023. She and Balwani were ordered to pay $452 million in restitution to the victims of the fraud. The credibility of the Ranos was attributed in part to Holmes' personal connections and ability to recruit the support of influential people, including Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, James Mattis, and Betsy DeVos, all of whom had served or would go on to serve as U.S. presidential cabinet officials. Holmes was in a clandestine romantic relationship with Balwani throughout most of the Toronto's history. Her father, Christian Ramus Holmes IV, was a vice president at Enron, an energy company that later went bankrupt after an accounting fraud scandal. So this all started with her father. You know what they say, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So her father was a fraud as well, or engaged in fraud as well. Odell Beckham Jr. So he's a Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio, square Saturn in Aquarius, sexual perversion. Now, I don't know much about this man, but I do remember reading that story about him wanting to pay some chick to poop on him or whatever. So, yeah, that's where he comes in. Jeffrey Epstein, Sun in Aquarius, squaring Saturn in Libra. Now, when I looked at his chart again and, looked at that birth time, that actually puts his sun at the 29th degree of Capricorn, 59 minutes. So 1 minute off from being sun in Aquarius. So Astro Theme has his sun in Aquarius, but technically it's at the 29th degree, 59 minutes of Capricorn, which again is only 1 minute away from Aquarius. So really, he got that 29 Capricorn energy going on, which makes a lot of sense because of the third party interference, the love triangles with him and what's her face, Ghislaine Maxwell and all that stuff. So inappropriate relationships with children, exploitation of minors with the use of partners, being disrespectful of others while in flight, and he had a private jet represented by that Aquarius. So it was said that he would have sex loudly on his private jet, even though there was other people on the jet and they could hear it and everything. Legal problems, indication that he didn't off himself with Saturn being in Libra. Charles Manson, I covered this crazy nut a number of times. Sun in Scorpio in the seventh, squaring Saturn and Aquarius in the 11th, pervert, run ins with the police, being under tight controls, being an experiment in psychology, which is what I believe, evoking fear in the hearts of people, sadistic. And we have the 9/11 attacks. Of course, the sun was in Virgo in the 12th house, squaring Saturn and Gemini in the ninth. Pre-orchestrated, which is Virgo, sneak and illusory 12th house attack on Twin Towers, represented by Saturn and Gemini. The premature deaths that occurred. First responders are faced with the biggest challenge of their lives. And what do you know? Osama bin Laden, who was blamed for the 9/11 attacks, had Sun square Saturn. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he's still alive. So Sun in Pisces squaring Saturn in Sagittarius, being a martyr for religion, being the fall guy for the 9/11 attacks, being falsely accused by a foreign government, the United States, hiding out and being outed. That's if he really was outed. And then finally, we have the city of Los Angeles. Los Angeles, California has Sun in Virgo in the 11th house, squaring Saturn in Sagittarius in the second. So Los Angeles can be bad for one's health, and that's mainly due to the smog in the air. So I took some quotes from Reddit about how people feel about the city of Los Angeles in terms of what they find to be unfavorable. So somebody put, honestly, the dust and air pollution with unnecessary leaf blowers, influx of transplants from other states and countries. People go to LA because they think they're going to make it, especially in Hollywood. A lot of runaways come to LA. Dirty. And this Sun square Saturn can definitely represent a runaway. And it could also represent dirtiness or messiness. More so messiness. LAPD being crooked, imprudent. So someone said LA is a tough place. I love it here, but it's expensive and difficult to get ahead. A lot of people want to be here. Inefficient. Traffic, of course, limited metro system with its own problems regarding cleanliness and safety. Although in my experience riding it semi-frequently, I've never noticed anything happen. And at least it's expanding. LAX sucks. I can't stand LAX. It's so chaotic. Although work is underway to improve it and other options may or may not exist. It's loud. Things are spaced too far apart. That's that Saturn and Sagittarius influence. And the city is designed for cars, which has created a toxic culture. It's always loud traffic, it's horrible, and public transportation is mediocre. Some cities in LA are a melting pot. That's Saturn and Sagittarius influence as well. And some are basically segregated. It definitely has its downsides in addition to the perks. Getting used to the fact that the police and government really don't want to help you out. So that concludes my video on Sun Square Saturn. Thank you, Kauai, again for sponsoring another video. And I'll be back with some more sponsored videos very shortly. So stay tuned for that. Thank you to all of my subscribers, patrons, Diggable Planets, clients, all of that. If you're just watching this channel for the first time, consider subscribing. Please like and share the video if you like the content, and peace and many blessings to you.